in case you would not be able to see, it would be noble for you to consider coming closer, but at least we can see. Right. We would like to start our session today, but maybe before we start that session, I would like to just do maybe a recap of, a very quick recap of what happened yesterday, and maybe to assist me to do that, you shall forgive me. But maybe I'll use this. I will use this bottle, and I will throw this bottle at anybody. And whoever misses the bottle will not tell us, or will tell us something that happened. No, I think we can just have maybe. I'll start maybe from Zelma. Zelma, good morning to you.
Morning.
Good. Would you like to tell us one thing that you, just one word from what transpired yesterday? Just one word that you remember.
What transpired yesterday?
Yeah, one word, yes.
Networking.
Yes?
Networking.
Networking. Thank you. Yes. Kobo 2 box. Good. Yes, tonight? Can you speak louder? Collaboration. Thank you. Yes. Yes, Julia. Mangold. But yes. Interact. Israel.
No, networking.
Oh, networking, yes, already been said. Right, right. So basically I think what we need to do today is that we want to proceed with our session, but what I would also want to indicate is that from yesterday we also have one of our partners at the department, Voluntary Services Overseas, VSO. They are here. What they also do is that they are interested in engaging with people who might want to, they believe in transforming the world through volunteers. So if anybody would be interested in opportunities around that, with somebody, maybe during tea, you can talk to her. She's at the back there. Hello. Yes. So, but from the areas of need currently, they would be interested in people working on education, various aspects around humanitarian assistance, and as well social work. So they thought maybe since we have a fair representation from Africa, it would be a good opportunity for some of our colleagues here to maybe given an opportunity to transform lives, transform communities, and it also gives you the exposure, it also gives you the experience, and more so, remember from our domain, as helping professions, I think it also speaks volumes about the pro-social behavior. Right. Today I would like to get an opportunity to get some skills and knowledge regarding how we can prepare for a conference submission. And I think this is quite handy, considering that 2020 with ISSBD 2020, and I think it is a very good opportunity for us. And to walk us through that, I would like to invite Professor Julie Robinson. Can we give a round of applause?
One of the things that you'll learn about ISSBD workshops is that there's really two parts of the program. One is to do with whatever the theme is that the conference organisers have chosen. And in this case, it's about digital technologies in low resource settings. And the other one is to try to get people some training in generic skills, the sorts of things that you need to succeed as a researcher. And I'm in that second camp. I'm going to talk to you not about anything to do with digital technology, but about an important professional skill. There's two important professional skills that we're trying to get you some feedback and some training on, and one of them is how to present a scientific poster, and the second one is how to write an abstract. So when you make a conference submission, what they want you to do is to come up with a very brief outline that's very clear, and it says, what is the issue that you're doing your research on? Why is it significant to anyone? What specific aspect did you address? How did you address it? What did you find? And why is that important, right? So that's the sort of thing that you have to do, not just for a conference submission, but for the thesis that you're writing, for if you're going to talk with a government minister about the findings that you've got, for all kinds of professional communication. You need to be able to synthesize what you've done into a very, very compact parcel. And so whether you're going to make a submission to a conference or not, I'm going to try to convince you that learning how to do an abstract really well is a really important part of your training as a professional. So why am I talking about abstracts in the context of writing one for a conference submission rather than for your thesis or for an article for publication or for a policy briefing for government? I'm doing it, as Dr. Zimbabwe just said, because of something that's going to happen next year. So next year, ISSBD will have its big international conference, which will be held in Greece on the historic island of Rhodes, which is over near the Turkish border. And the reason why you might do this, so you go, oh, well, I'll never be able to go to such a thing. Well, there are very few conferences in the world that have travel scholarships for early career scholars. But this is one of them. So even if you think there is no way that I'll be able to fund travel to Greece and my registration at an international conference and my accommodation, just know that this is one of the conferences that really wants global representation of early career scholars at its venue. So we're going to talk about what would maximize your chances of being accepted to present at this conference or other conferences. And remember that the conference abstract is what they're going to judge your chances of getting a travel scholarship. That's going to be one of the main things. Okay? So it's got lots and lots of reasons why you'd want to be able to do a fantastic abstract. I'm going to do two different things at this workshop. And the first one is the one you're already in. I'm going to give you some guidelines about how to prepare conference abstracts. I'm going to make reference to the ISSBD 2020 conference in my examples, but the things I'm going to talk about are generic. It doesn't matter whether you're going for a national conference in Zimbabwe or whether you're going for a regional conference in East or Southern Africa. So we're going to talk about how you develop an abstract on the basis of your research. And not everyone in the room is going to want to make a submission to a conference in the next 6 months. but some of you probably do. And so in the second half of the 2-hour conference poster session that's going to happen today, after everyone's had a chance to look at the posters and give people feedback, I'm going to convene a very small group, no more than 10, at the back of the room, where we're going to actually workshop how you would do your conference abstract. Right? So just 10 people who are really keen that they want to submit next for this upcoming ISSBD conference or for another conference within the next 6 months. And we're going to talk about refining your ideas about what you think you would like to submit and how you would frame it and all of those sorts of things. So I'm going to try to step you through 7 critical tasks. And I'm actually, it's called a workshop, and that means that I'm supposed to get you to do something, and that's what it's going to happen. The 10 people who I take to work on the back with me intensively for an hour, they've all got to have done these tasks, right? So if you're just going to sit there in the seat, you're not eligible for being with me to take the work that you've done during this session and turn it into an abstract, okay? So, we're going to identify, first of all, you've got to choose the conference. And you go, well, I'm going to go to ISSBD because it's got money. And I go, well, yeah, but does your research match what ISSBD 2020 is looking for? So sometimes it will and sometimes it won't, but almost without exception, you can't just summarize your thesis and expect it to be a good match for the conference. You're going to have to do some working around. Okay. So, working out which conference you're going to go to and getting it accepted is a mutual selection process. And at the beginning, I'm going to talk with you about your role in the mutual selection process. You need to say, is this conference right for me? The most obvious thing that is relevant no matter what area or what stage your research career is at is it relevant for my research? That is, am I going to get good feedback from these people? Am I going to get networking with a group of people who are directly relevant to my career aspirations? So you might want critical feedback. You might want to be able to identify a suitable examiner for your dissertation. You might want to develop a professional network. You might go, I really want to learn from those people. Have you seen who they've got coming to talk to us? They're just the leaders in their field, and I want this to be a great educational opportunity for me. It may be that there's a pre-conference workshop which trains you in research skills. There is at ISSBD 2020. So you actually get greater research capacity by going to this conference. And then you've got to work out just the boring bit, like, could I ever get there? Is the timing right? Is the place somewhere I can get to? What is the cost? Could I possibly meet that? And the priority that you give to these different things, other than is my research a good match, depends upon where you're up to in your research career. So some of these will be much more important. Finding an examiner for your dissertation isn't relevant if you've already got your PhD, right? But it's absolutely relevant if you're still at the point where it's going to go out for external examination and you need someone who you're going to trust to give you an honest but fair set of examiners' comments. But in addition to this, and I'm going to take a bit of a long detour at the minute, a new thing, you've always had to do all of those, and now you have to do one other really important thing. In the last 5 to 10 years, you've got to worry about, is this conference real? What do I mean by that? I mean that there's been articles that the American Psychological Association has put out about watching out for fake journals and fake conferences. Doesn't mean that things aren't published, it just means it's not really a journal that anyone is ever going to see. Your stuff will go in, they'll usually charge you some money, and no one will ever see it again. And here's a story from the New York Times talking about exactly the same thing. People who are trying to make money by pretending to offer something that is not actually substantive. So, the things that you want to find when you're doing your check to see whether it's real are, is this a well-known professional organisation? And is the conference listed on that professional organisation's website? That's a good test that it's real. The second thing is it endorsed by someone who's listed on the website? So normally, for example, this conference is endorsed by ISSBD, and you should be able to find something about it on an ISSBD related website. And what you are looking for is those wonderful things that make your heart soar very temporarily, that says, oh, I've just read your book, the conference organisers have read your paper on blah, 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 and we would really like to invite you to give a keynote address at this blah, 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 blah conference. Yeah. And it seems so real. They went to the trouble to search through my publications to find something that will make me think that they really know me and my research. And then it goes, oh, it's an obstetrics and gynecology conference in China. And I go, but you just read my research on the well-being of adolescent refugees resettled in Australia, and you decided that you wanted it at an obstetrics conference in China? What are the odds of that? Also, if it's a new conference, it's a conference that's never been heard of before. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of how sneaky people are, right? The biggest international conference for psychology, I know some of you from education, there'll be a parallel there, is ICP. Always, people call it ICP. It's the International Congress on Psychology. Turns out that's really important, but everyone knows it as ICP. It will be held next year in Prague, right? And this is a real conference in green, real. It's got a theme, it's got everything else. It looks like a very professional website. I know, because I've been around longer than you guys, that this should be endorsed by a very specific professional organisation. And so I look on the website for this conference to see whether or not one of the partners is the organisation that I know should be there. And indeed it is. The International Union of Psychological Science is said to be one of the partners. So I then go to the International Union on Psychological Science website and discover that indeed this conference is on their website. And I go, okay, so I'm just going to look and see whether or not the people who are said to be going to this conference already, that's their keynote speakers, are people who we know of. And I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know everyone on this list, but I knew some of the people on this list, and they are indeed at the top of their field. And just as an aside, a number of them are from Africa, and not all South Africa. We've got a Kenyan and a Zambian who are also on the list of keynote speakers. So one day, you could be there. But there's another website that you can go to, and it looks like this. And it says, oh, this is the ICP conference, and it's in Prague, and it's a whole bunch of things. So how do I know it's fake? Well, just because, again, I've been around a bit longer. The name is almost exactly the same. The only word that changed is that this is a conference, not a congress. ICP is still there, it's still in Prague. The year is wrong, but other than that, it's, you know, it's one of those things where you know it only happens every 4 years. You always get the date wrong. It looks at the beginning as though it's the real thing. It's a slightly less professional web page design. And if you look at the top, ICP is not the parent URL. And the English, even though it's readable and all the rest of it, is not quite sophisticated English. But there's a lot of things on here that make you think, oh, this must be the real thing. They say that there's going to be conference proceedings and it's going to be indexed by a whole range of different things. They say that there'll be a special issue of a journal that you can apply to. Not everyone will get into it. And behold, it's an electronic journal, an open access journal, but they're not even going to charge you money, which many open access journals do, in order to publish it. And everything's going to be blind peer reviewed by 3 competent people. I mean, how could it be wrong? Well, it's too good to be true. Yeah, it's too good to be true. And if you looked through here, it looks like there's this whole line of people who are going to index this, but the people who you're after, things like PsycInfo, Medline, all the Ovid people, they're not in that list. Also, they don't tell you the name of the journal that there's going to be this special issue in, which you would think that would be one of the things that they would do. So be careful, because if it seems too good to be true, it probably isn't true. Now, when you go to a conference, you'll find, it's a big international conference, you'll find that there are parallel sessions, unlike here. If you go to ICP, there's about 30 simultaneous sessions. That is, every 2 hours you've got to decide which of 30 different things that are all happening at the same time you've got to go to. So when you open the fake website's program, you're not surprised to find that there are going to be parallel sessions, right? There's going to be more than one thing going on at a time. When you open the program, you discover that there's kind of even more awkward English expressions. So it reads, digital program is only online bound program. And I don't know what that means. They're all English words, but the order does not make any sense. So the first thing is, why would ICP not proofread its stuff better? And the second thing is, when you look at the program, it's truly astonishing, because the first stream at this International Congress of Psychology is supposed to be on aerosol science and technology. And the second stream is indeed on psychological sciences, but the third stream on day 1 is human and social sciences research, or maybe, but the next stream is on engineering and physical sciences research 1 and 2. You go, what? Can you work out what they're doing? Who knows what these guys are doing? The fake conference is doing what? They are collecting money. How are they doing it, Pan? Yes. But what are they doing with the conference? They're doing it, they're going to make money out of you by a registration fee and then offering you almost nothing for your registration fee. But how are they going to make enough money? They are selling exactly the same conference to multiple people. So you know that this is the one that you saw. My goodness, it's the International ICP, International Conference on Psychology, and then, oh look, it's the International Conference on Aerosol Science and Technology. Can you see what they're doing? It's exactly the same conference venue with exactly the same dates in exactly the same cities, and they're going around and they're putting on, so every one of those streams, they're selling to a different audience in order to maximise the amount of money that they're getting. And you go, well, how could they get away with that? Well, it's kind of easy. Because remember there was one on science, engineering and physical sciences? Well, it turns out that you could have gone to the right website initially, and then when you typed it back in the second time, if you hadn't bookmarked it, you'd have ended up at the wrong place, because look at this. This is indeed the International Conference on Engineering and Natural Science. It was held in exactly the same year, in exactly the same city, and both websites have got a picture of the bridge between Buda and Pest. So you could go, oh, that's not how I remembered the picture of the bridge. But yeah, It's got the right name, it's in the right year, it's in the right city, it's both website, you know, it's got a picture of the bridge. What are the chances that there could be two conferences? What are the chances? The chances are really high because that's what they're relying on. You notice that there is no agriculture stream. There is no obstetrics stream. There is no law stream. Why not? Because there was not a conference, a major conference in Prague at this time. Does this make sense? They're putting things in the cities and calling them things that are almost the same as a real conference that are going on in that same city in roughly the same time. Does that make sense? And that's why there is aerosol science, psychology, and this one, and not 101 other things. So how are they making money? It's the equivalent of $560 to enroll. And when you get there, there's not going to be anything, and there's certainly not going to be an audience. Some poor person is coming all the way from the Philippines to speak, according to their program. And every other person who's on that program is doing an e-presentation, like the one we saw yesterday from Germany, where there's no one. So they're going to be talking to an empty audience, and the poor guy from the Philippines is going to turn up and give his psychology paper. There's going to be no one there, not even the other presenters. But he will have paid $560 US and his airfare for the privilege. Now it turns out that these people, why do I think that they're money makers? Well, if you go and you drill down a bit more, you discover that there's pages and pages and pages. This is just one of about 50 conferences that they've got on this year. They're all over the world, and what it means is that in Tokyo, there are 3 or 4 other major international conferences this year, and there they will have advertised things that are almost exactly the same as the real ones. Does this make sense? And in Singapore, there must be another half a dozen international conferences, and they'll be advertising again something with almost exactly the same name. And you go, well, let me take down those people. WASNet, the World Association for Science and Engineering Technology. I'm not going to go anywhere near them. But you need to be very careful because they're very clever. And as soon as it turns out that everyone knows who they are, they will simply change their name. Yeah? So one of the important universities in the United States, California Institute of Technology, trying to protect their own PhD students, has tracked down that there are 72 organisations currently working in the world who are out to try to get you. And as soon as one of them gets known, it simply changes its name so that it's something that looks again like it's the World Association or the International Association for something else. Here's another, I thought, oh my goodness, I've just deleted them all from my inbox. And so I thought, oh well, actually, you only have to wait 3 days and you'll get some more. So here's another way in which people make money. This is one that wants me to go to the Education, Psychology and Behavioural Science Conference in Istanbul. And they're going to give me 3 nights free accommodation in a 5-star hotel if I would just come and give a keynote speech. So again, if it seems too good to be true, it probably isn't true. I know. This is the other thing that I need to talk with you about. Tony's just pointed out there's actually a really, really famous cultural psychologist who's listed on this as being one of the key people who's organising this. I think that if we wrote to him, he would have absolutely no knowledge that his name is up there. So this is another thing. Is he died?
No, but that's not true. This happened to me, and there was somebody I knew, not real time, but somebody else. Sorry.
I think you're right. He may not know, but he may. So let me tell you what happened to me.
I was invited to a conference in Rome. I thought, oh great, I'll go see the relatives, blah, blah, blah. I was this close to accepting, and they gave me free registration or something. Very nice. But there was somebody's name I recognized. So it happened to be somebody I know. I wrote to her and asked her about it. And she said, I don't know. She's from Spain. So she said, I don't know. They invited me. I thought I'd go. But now that you mention it, I don't know anybody else. I don't know any of the organizers. I don't know anyway, so I did not accept. And then later on, I looked around, I followed up, and she withdrew. Because she did not realize it wasn't a real conference. It was one of these predatory conferences. So even very well-known people, I mean, we're just kind of naive about this. Who expects this sort of thing to happen? And like you showed us, it's very convincing.
Yeah, I got another 3 in the last 3 days. So, in general, if it seems too good to be true that someone read your thesis and wants to invite you to give a keynote speech at a major international conference, I'm sorry to tell you that it probably isn't true. So it seems as though if it seems too good to be true, it probably is, unless it's ISSBD, because ISSBD actually gives you real travel grants. It is a real conference. There is a real pre-conference capacity building program for early career scholars. There really are early career scholar events throughout the conference that you will be invited to that will introduce you to some of the main scholars in the field. But be careful out there. And be careful out there especially because you're the ones they're going after. You know, I looked at that ICP conference page and I went, it just doesn't look right. And I couldn't put my finger on it at the beginning, but it's only because I've been around longer than you that I went, it's not quite what I was expecting. And so I drilled down some more and discovered it was a complete fake. Yeah? But as Tony said, even people who've been in the field for a long time have to be really careful that they're not caught because they'll change. Who remembers that it's the Congress rather than the conference? No one ever uses those words. It's always ICP, ICP. Yeah? Okay, so back to where we were meant to be. You are trying to work out whether this conference is right for you, and they're trying to work out whether you are right for them. So is it relevant to the conference's goals? Sometimes they have a particular theme and you have to match it, otherwise you're not in. Is the quality of your research what they're looking for? Is it communicated in a way that's really clear, that gives them the confidence that if you were to do a poster or to stand up and speak, that the audience would be able to benefit from you? Yeah? So it's an English language conference or a French language conference. Is your abstract convincing that you would be able to present clearly and coherently in that language? And they also need to balance their program. So if it's one on lifespan development, after the first 100 papers on infancy, they've kind of got to think, well, we need something on adolescence and we need something on adulthood. Yeah? And you can't actually, your abstract has to convince them of those things at the top, but you don't actually have much say over who else is applying and whether or not yours just is going to be dropped out just because it's in an unbalanced program. Now, they may not have sent it around yet. I know that some of you are taking notes. I've actually made a handout of my presentation and it's in Google Drive, and I've sent the link to the conference organisers. So at some point they will distribute it to everyone who's around and you can download the handout. So your job is to maximise the relevance of your goals for what they're after. They're going to tell you what they are. The quality of the research really shines out in what you write, and that your communication convinces anyone that you'll be able to do a fantastic job. So how do you make sure that your conference looks absolutely relevant to the conference organiser? It's in the call for proposals, what they're looking for. It's in the conference theme, what they're looking for. ISSBD doesn't tend to do themes, but others do. And it's in what are the review panels. So if they give you a list of these are all the review panels for the submissions and yours doesn't fit in any of them, chances are it's not your conference. So just going to an example, the ISSBD call for proposals has a list of what sorts of things it encompasses, and if yours is outside that, that's not going to be such a great thing. The real International Congress on Psychology has a theme, which we don't have, and it'd be ideal for you to try to link your paper into this theme. Going back to ISSBD, these are the review panels. Yeah, they're right there, they're on the page, there's no secret about what they are, and you go, would my paper fit under one of these headings, which are all the headings that they say we think we're going to present at the conference? Okay. Now, because I said it's going to be interactive, what I'd like you to do now is to think, what conference would I target? And you don't necessarily need to know what the conferences out there all are. I want you to think, what would be the best place for my research? So if you were doing a study where you were looking at, the Zimbabwean government has got a policy of putting computers in schools, and you went around and you looked at the percentage of schools who actually had the computers that they were supposed to, that's targeting a national audience. No one from Akron, Ohio in the United States or Berlin is going to have a big interest in that, but it could absolutely change what the government in Zimbabwe is going to do in order to do a better job. So it's absolutely relevant research, it's a good thing to do, but you're aiming for a national audience, you're not aiming for an international audience. Similarly, you could be doing research that is relevant, probably not just in Zimbabwe, but also in the neighbouring countries. Or maybe even across Africa it would be relevant, but it wouldn't necessarily be relevant for someone from Japan. Yeah? So one of the things you might do is thinking about what would be a useful Pan-African conference. Yeah? So you might be writing down now, I think I need a national conference in social sciences. Or I think I need an African conference in early education. Does that make sense? So think about what would be the best match between what a conference is about and what your research is about. What would it need to look like? So if you're coming down the back with me, halfway after the first hour of the posters, I'm going to ask to see this first. Okay, so what you're doing, you're looking at the goals, the theme, capacity building, what are the things that are there, what's the fit between what I want and what they're offering. And we're looking at, should it be national, should it be regional, or could it have a global audience? And one of the ways you get a global audience is by using a theoretical framework, something that makes the significance of what you've done go beyond the actual data that you collected. So although this doesn't test attachment theory, it is relevant to people who are interested in attachment theory, and I can make it link in with a bigger picture. People from Japan who are interested in attachment, people from Spain who are interested in attachment, people from Peru who are interested in attachment might be interested in my work, even though it's about something that's locally relevant in Zimbabwe. So if you were interested in autism, you might think, I'm going to go to a conference on special education or developmental delay, or I'm going to go to a conference on education or child development. Those are bigger, right? So where does your research best fit? Now I want you to think about whether or not it's feasible for you to do that, whatever it is you've chosen. Would it be affordable? Think about everything. Think about whether or not there might be scholarships, travel scholarships that might make it more feasible. Is the submission date likely to be soon? Might you say, I'm doing my PhD, I actually would need to target a conference in 2 years? Would you be looking for a conference in 1 year? Would you be ready to go if the conference was next month? Okay, so now you've got down on a sheet of paper or on your tablet the kind of conference that you're looking for and what challenges to feasibility you think there might be in you actually getting there. Task 2 is to say, how can I make my research look most relevant to the people reviewing my submission? Because you will know that although your research for your thesis or your independent research had very specific goals, it's a data set, and data sets can be used to answer many, many different questions. So even if your thesis was about topic 1, one of the good professional skills you can have is to say, how can my research be made relevant to a variety of different audiences? How can I give many messages, mine my data for its relevance for many different audiences? Okay, so there's 2 reasons why you spend a lot of time on this. Because your one abstract serves 2 purposes. The first one is getting you actually accepted by the people who run the conference. So your conference abstract will be sent to experts in the subspecialty that you're applying for. So the first thing is the conference abstract is going to be one of is going to be the main and often only thing that's going to determine whether they're going to say yes or no to you. And there's no travel grant or anything else if they say no. So you need to be able to get it to say yes, them to say yes. And the second thing is your abstract is going to be the only thing that people who are going to the conference have in order to determine whether they go to your presentation or someone else's. And so it's absolutely key to you attracting the audience that you need to give you good feedback or to build a network with or for you to try to find a collaborator in. It's also the thing that is usually the only or the main criteria by which they determine who gets the travel grants. Now, effective communication involves tailoring your message to the specific audience. You've got to work out who is the likely audience at this conference. What disciplines are they going to be drawn from? Is it a multidisciplinary conference or a single discipline conference? What kind of background are they from? Are they going to be Japanese? Are they going to be South Americans? Are they going to be mainly Europeans? What kind of background knowledge are they likely to have? So if your paper is on autism and you go to an autism conference, everyone will know what autism is, yeah? But if you go to a developmental delay conference or a psychology conference, you're going to have to give people more information to help them understand exactly what you're on about. Does that make sense? And so one useful way of being a professional that helps you to get usually more than one paper out of your thesis, more than one paper out of any data set that you collect, is to see your research like a meal. So a meal is made of many different ingredients, and your job is to highlight the ingredients in your meal that are the most relevant for this conference. And you submit your abstract after you've worked out what are the main things, the things that are the best match. They're the things that you highlight in your abstract. I don't care what your thesis abstract highlights. Yes? You submit the same abstract that you submitted for your thesis, the chances are the answer's going to be no. Okay, so here you could go. It's one study, many stories. So this could be a story about noodles. It could be a story about chicken. It could be a story about vegetables. Yeah? So you go, oh, this is a conference about noodles. And you go, have I got the research for you? And these noodles are made more nutritious by the addition of chicken and vegetables. So it's a story about noodles, but it's particularly interesting because in my noodle story, I added this nutritional value of chicken and vegetables. Or it's a story about, what do those look like? It's a story about vegetables, carrots. It's a story about carrots. It's a carrot conference. You go, have I got the research for you? I've got carrots, but I've made them more appetizing by the addition of noodles and chicken, right? So what you're doing is you're highlighting the things in your research, in your data set, that are most directly relevant to what the conference focuses on. In addition, you can be saying, what I'm going to focus on is my theoretical framework, right? And this is the thing that says what's overarching. So it's a theoretical, it's a thing that's over specific details. And in this case, this is a story about soup, right? So the idea is you've got to match what you've got to what the conference organisers are seeking in order to maximise your chance. So, think about the conference that you just chose. Think about your research. Think about what ingredients in your research you would be able to highlight to make it maximally relevant for the conference you're going for. So, for example, if you were going for a gender conference and you had boys and girls in your data set, you'd be thinking about doing a new analysis, you may never have done it before, that talked about the influence of gender, right? If it's a developmental conference, you've got to link it, it may be about education, link it to human development. What is the aspect about this that's relevant to development? So if you're coming to me down the back, I'm going to ask you for your list of ingredients and your circling of the ones that you think are most relevant for the conference you want to target. So it could be, I think my theoretical framework is what I'm going to highlight. It could be, I think that there are things in my sample. I've got kids of different ages. I'm following kids over time. I'm looking at the elderly with different levels of functioning. I'm doing something like this. And what measures or what qualitative approach have you got that you could emphasise to make it relevant for this conference? So if you're coming down the back with me, I need something on your paper about what you think you would highlight. And remember that if you then go to a second conference, you'd have to start all over again, right? Which ones are going to be the most relevant? What could I possibly do? Oh, I've got urban and rural. Now that's suddenly important. Okay. Your third task is to choose how would you want to deliver this? Because people will say, I would need you to choose the format for your presentation. And the sorts of things that are usually available are these. Not all at all conferences. So there are symposia, that is a series of linked papers. They're all about a particular theme. So there might be things about orphans and other vulnerable children in low-income countries. And you could have people from a lot of different countries who are working with that population. So a symposium can be a series of oral papers where people speak and have a PowerPoint presentation or not in the background. Or they could be posters, a series of related posters. And people get to talk about their posters one by one, and then the whole group gets together and you can mill around and talk to anyone you want to. You could have something that is an individual presentation. It doesn't have to be linked with anyone else. It could be an individual oral paper presentation, or it could be an individual poster. So these are all individual posters. Yeah? This is an individual poster session. One is not necessarily linked to the other by any theme. And then there are the things that don't fit either of those. There are kinds of work which are panel discussions, round tables, salons, all of those sorts of things which are different. Now, if you happen, just using an example, I'm trying to get you to understand that not all of them are available at every kind of conference. So if you were going to go, using an example again, if you're going to go to ISSBD 2020, there's certain things that are just not on the agenda. You can't propose a round table, and you can't propose that I'm going to stand up and give an individual oral paper. You can choose the others that are on this list. And if you're an early career scholar, you'll be encouraged to do an individual poster. And that's why we wanted to get you to practice doing that and get better and better at doing that here, so that you had the greatest chance of getting the audience that you wanted and really attracting people to your research that want to talk with you about things, because you're really an effective communicator of research using poster as a format. Okay, so if you've got lots and lots of text and very little things that could be turned into a visual presentation, then an oral paper is better. If you've got something that could be turned into something visual, a poster is the best thing. And the reason that people promote posters is you get a lot, if you've done it well, you'll attract an audience and have the chance for real dialogue. Whereas in a paper oral presentation, you talk and then it's over. People are often running over time, everyone flees to the next session, and you've presented, but you get no interaction, no feedback, no networking. So the idea of posters is, especially for early career scholars, that's a really advantageous format if it could possibly be used for your presentation. Now, we talked about networking and why it can be important. Some of you in this room are working on similar topics, and that has been revealed by the posters that you put up and will be further revealed by the list of topics that people are interested in, which will be circulated soon if it's not here already. And that means that while you're here, before everyone goes home, there's the possibility of you identifying other people and seeing whether or not 3 or 4 of you could put together a symposium. A poster symposium or a paper symposium, okay? You've got a couple of months to get this together so that you're all at the same point where you'd be able to submit linked presentations. So I want you to think about the research that you've got, the conference that it would be going to, what sorts of things you'd have to highlight in order to be effective there. And I want you to choose what would be the most effective, permitted conference presentation format. So, just going back, if you were going to ISSBD 2020, what would be the best thing that you could have chosen for you? Okay, so if you're going to come down the back with me, you've got something on the paper. Good for you. Okay, now you've got to say what's going to go into that abstract, right? How is it that I'm going to tell a story that's going to be so compelling that the people reviewing things are going to say, we want this one, and that the audience, potential audience who reads your abstract says, I want to go to this one. Remember, you're in competition with hundreds and hundreds of other people for an audience. So you've got to think about what your story is. So the first thing, this is not writing the abstract, right? This is the skeleton that's going to be the basis for you writing the abstract. So you haven't started the abstract yet. Think about the ingredients that you're going to highlight from your research and say, what kind of story could I tell? What would be an interesting way of presenting the story that I have based upon the data that I have around those things that are relevant for this conference? And just write down just 1 or 2 ideas of the sorts of things that you think would be interesting. And an abstract is a very specific communication medium. It needs to be a very concise summary. There will be a word limit on this, and if you try to type 1 more character, the computer will not let you do it. So you have to practice and practice and practice to get it down. A well-written abstract makes the reader want to know more. They really have enough to make a judgment about whether this is a good thing for their conference, whether it's well articulated, all of those sorts of things, but they want to see the real thing. Expect that you would need to allow multiple drafts. I'm not talking about 2, I'm talking about 6. And make sure you give yourself adequate time. Do not go, yeah, ISSBD submissions are due in 3 days, I'll start now. So it's a concise summary. The story needs to do this job. What topic, what area am I studying? Why is it significant? Why would anyone care? What was my aim? What did I do? How did I try to address that aim? That's your method. What did I find? Why is that important? Okay, so you've got 6 things to do, at least 6 dot points to write for your story. What's the area? Why does anyone care about that area? What's its significance? What was my aim? What's my method of addressing that aim? What did I find? Why is that important? And now you've got to choose a title. And you go, oh, I'll just use my thesis title. And I'm going to go, no, don't do it. So the idea is that for most people, the only thing they'll ever see of your work is your title. And so this has got to be something that is both intriguing and informative. So you should expect to make lots and lots of drafts, show it to lots and lots of people. And the worst thing you can do is to try to pack every single piece of information into your title. Normally there's a limit, and again it won't let you do any more than a certain number of characters, but also no one will read it. Yeah? It goes on for 5 lines. No one's going to be reading down to the end of the 5th line. So take some time, because this is your advertisement. This is the thing that's going to determine the size and the composition of the audience you attract to whatever it is that you do. It's all that most people will ever see in the conference program. If you're standing by your poster, it's all that most people will ever read of your poster. You'll either hook them with the title or you won't. Okay, so just so that you understand how it normally works, if you're looking at the instructions, you will see that the title can be no more than 150 characters, and if you try to write 151, it will stop you. This includes the spaces, hyphens, apostrophes, the whole works. So it needs to be short and snappy, at the same time that it's intriguing and informative. That's why it's going to take you a lot of drafts to get it right. And this says something that's wrong. Okay. Don't choose the most effective permitted presentation format. Think of what sorts of things you might do for a title. Is there something that's an expression, the name of a movie or a song? Is there something that would be intriguing, that's got a pun in it, that's poetic, that's something that's going to be intriguing and informative at the same time? And in less than 150 characters. So you will not come up with the world's greatest title right now. All right? Just want you to think about what you would try to do. I try to link it with this. I try to come up with something that related to that. Now, finally, you get to write the abstract. And again, expect to write many drafts. Now, the way it normally works, conferences have different requirements, but a normal way of doing things is to say, at the beginning, you need to spend 20% of the words that you've got telling someone why anyone should be interested in your field. Why should I keep reading? Yeah. And a specific aim at the end of that. Then about 20% again of your space should be devoted to your method. Most people want to find out, what did you discover? So you have between 30 and 40% of your word count to the results. And this is not every result you found. It's the results that are directly relevant to the aim or aims that you've identified for this conference. And the thing that most people don't want to do is say, why does it matter? Why does that answer matter? But the conclusion is usually one of the things that is a distinguishing feature between whether you get a yes or a no. So don't just write back out a summary for me of what the results say. Tell me why I should care. So what are the things that are really important? If you can't obey the rules, they won't take you. So make sure it conforms to the requirements in terms of word length, in terms of the components. If it says it's got to have a conclusion, make sure there's a conclusion. If it says it's structured, that means it wants a heading: introduction, method, results, conclusion. If it's unstructured, it doesn't want those subheadings. Find a way to link all the dot points about the main things you wanted to do that we've done in the previous task into a set of logical, flowing sentences. And always show it to someone else. It doesn't matter whether it's your mum or your brother. Show it to someone else and say, would you want to know more on the basis of this? What's not clear? What have I not said? What have I said too much about? So the quality of your research must be obvious to the review panel. Large numbers of people get told no. You do not want to be one of them. So what is it? We've got some studies done on what reviewers give high points to on review panels. And these are them. It's based on theory, or it's very clearly based upon previous research which is significant in some way. It focuses on a very clear research problem, and only the most relevant information has been given to me. He doesn't try to tie it to the whole of child development or the whole of Freudian theory or the whole of something else. It's specific. It has very clear aims or hypotheses, only one, not both. The method that's been chosen is a method that is appropriate for this conference and which is appropriate for the aims that this research was meant to address. There is a meaningful interpretation of results. I do not want to hear blah, 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 T equals F equals blah, blah, blah. I don't want to know that. I want to know, express it for me in a form where I see the significance. Unexpectedly, there was no difference between Blanc and Blanc. Focus only on the highlights. You usually don't need to give any statistical values. Explain the results, don't just list them. And then what are the practical, policy or theoretical implications of what you just told me? Why is it important? Okay, so just going to make sure you understand how tough this job is going to be and why it's going to take you a long time. Here's an example. Going back to ISSBD 2020, the abstract has in total a maximum of 300 words. The computer will stop you entering 301. What that means is, if you've only got 60, is that the whole of your motivation about this is the field that I'm in, this is why it's significant, and these are my aims or my hypotheses. You've got 60 words maximum. What was my method? 60 words maximum. What is my results? Probably up to 120 words. What does it all mean? About 60 words. So the first time you write this out, it's going to take 3 times this long, right? You're going to have to cut and revise until it's down so that you've got the essence of your research that's relevant for this audience. Okay. 60 words is nothing. The last one is you need to check it and submit it. Make sure that the way you've expressed it is exactly a match for what this conference says it is about. Not just the organisation, but the specific conference of this organisation. Is it in an appropriate and permitted presentation style? Does it meet all of the submission format requirements? If they say put the title in uppercase, make sure it's in uppercase. If they say italicize your affiliation, make sure you've italicized your affiliation. Make sure all the components are there, especially make sure your conclusion is there. And the last but absolutely critical thing is submit by the deadline. Expect that your cat will die, your mother will go into hospital, and you'll come down with the flu in the week prior to the submission. And make sure you've got plenty of time to make sure that it's done on time. And then you go, so you've got 3 months, and you go, oh, why is she telling us we've got 3 months? But you're almost likely, almost all of you are likely to need to do at least one new analysis in order to be ready if you want to do ISSBD and match it. Yeah. Some of you will go, I don't think I've got enough data yet to go to an international conference, but I think that if I got another 20 people, I'd have a good chance. Does that make sense? So some of you are going to need 3 months to be able to be ready to present something that's going to be likely to be picked up. And then you go, so it's over? And I go, no, it's not over. What do you got to do then? You've got to wait for the judgment of the panel. And this will normally be sent to you via email. And sometimes it will be good news. Yep. What do you need to do then? Well, the first thing is, do you have a passport? Do you know how long it can take to get a passport? We had people who were due to come to Australia who got a travel grant from Kenya and Nigeria, and they did not make it. That money was wasted. No one ended up using the travel grant. Why? because they went, surely a month will be enough to get a visa from Australia. Answer, no. You are doing this at a very particular time. Large numbers of African people are trying to enter Europe, yes, on boats out of Libya, on boats going towards Spain. There's a whole lot of people in Greece who are claiming asylum. Where are we going? Greece. They're going to want to know that you have money in the bank, that you have children and husbands or wives here, that you have a reason for coming back to Zimbabwe or Nigeria or other sorts of things. You should expect that it's going to take you months to get this visa. So as soon as you get told, yes, you're coming and you've got a travel grant, your job is to get your passport, start putting in all of the things that you need in order to actually be able to use that travel grant. Because people were told, no, you don't get a travel grant last time, who would have been able to come, and some people who got travel grants wasted them. They never made it. But you also have to be prepared that also start designing your poster now, and remember that there's a link that you've all already got to the poster guide. It's done deliberately. I did it. Make sure that you make use of it so that you get the best chance of getting what you need out of the conference. But you also have to prepare yourself for the fact that you might get bad news. And if you do, remember that it's supply and demand. It could be that your paper was really good, but they already had 500 on infancy. Yep. It could be that you're going for a major international conference that has a rejection rate of 80%. Yep. It could be a whole range of things. So you don't feel destroyed. It's not a good day, but you're not destroyed. You will not get an explanation about why the answer was no, but you need to check because there are very common reasons. One of them is that you did not convince another person that your paper was a good match for the conference. That's the single worst thing that can happen. The research findings, no matter how well conducted it was, are really of low interest. You wanted to find people who were at risk of suicide ideation. You went out, you surveyed 5,000 people, you didn't find anyone. Yeah? You did everything right, but the results are not very interesting. Or they're unable to judge the merit of your research either because of poor expression or because there was insufficient, you didn't get the details that they needed into your number of words. So, as I said, there's going to be a session in the back of the room. I'll take 10 people only who workshop what they might put forward for ISSBD 2020 or any other conference that I can quickly look up that you might be aiming for a submission in the next 6 months. So you can contact me about being one of those 10 if you're interested during the morning break. And good luck. I hope to see you in Greece next year.
Another round of applause for Julie. Thank you so much, Prof, for the insightful presentation. I think it's a very good eye-opener for most of us. Very informative. Maybe at this point in time, allow me to get any questions, remarks, compliments from the floor.
Thanks, Jelly. The abstracts, wouldn't it be appropriate to add a few recommendations? You ended on conclusion.
recommendations are a tricky one, because if you have, your conclusion can be in the form of recommendations, but recommendations can also be completely inappropriate. If you have done a qualitative study of 10 people in your country and you want to tell your government how to change education policy, I will tell you that is not appropriate scientific behaviour, that you would need more than that. If your study is one of 20 that really nails the coffin on this policy, and you're able to say, this is it, this was the last chance that this policy had of showing any kind of benefit, then you can say, this is it. We should get rid of this policy, yeah? So the conclusions can be in the form of recommendations, but just be really careful that what you're saying is not outrageous, because we're scientists and we know that a single study, especially a small study, should not be the reason that something is changed in policy or practice. But we also know that all that it takes is one piece of disconfirming evidence to throw a theory out. So it may be that what you've got is the one thing that really nails a theory. You know, there were a whole lot of people saying, oh, you know, the reason that babies learn to speak so easily is because we changed the way we talk to babies. We don't talk to them with all of the disfluencies that have been in my presentation today, where I start a sentence and go, okay, how are you going to finish that sentence? So it's simple, it's direct, it's all of these sorts of things. And everyone thought, okay, this is the answer. And then there were it only took 2 examples, one in Papua New Guinea with the Kaluli and one in North Africa, where there was societies where everyone went looking for it and they could not find it. There is no baby talk register. And it only took 2 occasions and the whole thing's got to get thrown out. Qualitative research is meant to bring deep understanding. It's not there to be generalised. Yeah? So you need to understand what is the nature of the research that you've got, what is the accumulation of research say, and if it's appropriate, go for it, make recommendations. But inappropriate recommendations will get you a no as much as nothing will. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Thank you, Prof, for your presentation. I have a couple of questions, but I'll try to zero down on just 2. Maybe in addition to that, of recommendations which has just been addressed, I thought maybe, because I've seen some of the abstracts which are rejected because they don't have implications. I don't know if you can talk to that one again. Conclusions, implications, and recommendations. Then maybe, as you were presenting, I saw something on symposium. Can you just show the difference between workshop, symposium, seminar, and conference? Because people confuse. Even when we were coming here, some were saying we're going for a conference, but it was advertised as a workshop. Then the last one.
Yes.
It is about infopreneurship.
It is about
Infopreneurship.
entrepreneurship.
Okay, it's entrepreneurship in the information science.
Oh, okay.
You talked about those unscrupulous people who
Yes.
swindle
Yes.
our hard-earned cash by advertising for non-existent conferences.
The conference will actually take place in Prague. It's just that there'll only be 4 people there. Yeah, but
if I
yes.
can justify. And I don't know how we can deal with this, because it looks like people are making money through an orthodox way by advertising those conferences. How can we deal with such things. Thank you.
Okay, so just dealing with the first one, in fact, we scholars are at fault here because we will advertise our local, our departmental talk for the week will be called a symposium and it's not, or a colloquium and it's not, or a seminar and it's not. It's someone standing up and talking. So a symposium, the way it's worked at a conference is someone is a leader, a convener, they write an overview explaining what the purpose of this sequence of related papers is meant to achieve. So, I'm part of a symposium for ISSBD 2020, an invited symposium, and we're getting everything together now. So Britt Oppedal from Norway is coordinating it, and the idea is that all of us who did 25 years work or something or other on the well-being of refugee kids and who are about to retire are going to give our a summary of the most useful things we learned about this on the way through. And every one of the papers is going to have the same format. It's going to say, these are the specific issues about kids' well-being that we focused on. This is our learnings. This is an intervention that we developed on the basis of those learnings, and this is the results of the evaluation of that intervention that we did. Does this make sense? So all the papers, this is unusual, it's not normal, but can you see that they've all got a theme? They're all about the same topic, the well-being of displaced young people. They're all going to have a similar kind of structure to them, and they're all going to be from people in very different parts of the world. So we've got people from the Netherlands, people from Scandinavia, I'm an Australian, so we've got all these people from different places who are going to be talking about a common issue, and it has an organising abstract, and then it has abstracts for each of the papers. So that was what you would need to do for either a paper symposium or for a poster symposium. That's what someone would have to be able to organise on your behalf. Is that did that help?
Sure.
Whereas an individual poster or an individual paper is the kind of thing that you've got here. Yeah. Where someone was doing research on their own or with a small group and they presented just their work. The person sitting next to them on the next poster may be about the same topic or something completely different. A round table is where you should get some experts or some leaders in a field to sit together and someone kind of interviews them. Someone talks about, resilience is a concept that's been quite popular in the literature recently. You work with children, street-involved children in Zimbabwe, and you work with refugees in Jordan, and you work with something else. How has the concept of resilience informed your work? And they go round the round table and they talk to each other and they talk to the interviewer and they also talk to the audience. So there are very different formats at different conferences, and some of them are more interactive, some of them are more chatty, others of them are very formal.
Thank you, Prof. Julie. I must say I'm so humbled to see you. I've been following you, and you are one of my hidden mentors, so I'm happy to be here. Particularly, I'm so happy about how you have brought about the symposium issue and the predator conferences. I would particularly like to hear more on predator journals, and this is something that is really particular in our universities. And it's live, that maybe one time now that you've talked about predator conferences, you could also one time think about predator journals and how we can really identify them. The journals that really just are there just to get money, and they really don't care about the quality of research that is outside there. The other thing that I've found of real use is maybe a question. You just mentioned about you can really have well-conducted research, well-reported, but of no interest to a conference organizers and panelists. That now lets me think, make me think that there could be emerging interesting areas of research within ISSBD that you may need to bring into the foreground so that when we are also refining our abstracts, we may be able to think about interesting areas, because as much as you talk about the various themes of panelists, they may not be interested in certain sectors of those particular themes. So would you all help us know whether there are interesting areas that I imagine? And then maybe you also expound more on theoretical papers. I also know that we need to be able to criticize, to critique data, and to be able to be, as early careers, make quality theoretical papers. I don't think you mentioned anything. I also don't know whether it's wrong to come to a very good international conference of this magnitude with a theoretical paper. And the last one is about your new innovation of poster presentations among early careers. I know in policy making scenarios, today we are talking about how long can you interact with a policy-making body to understand your issue so that it's part of a policy. And we are moving towards developing the competence of early careers in order to speak to a population that doesn't understand their areas. So the area of communication, how to package your content to convince somebody in like 10 minutes or 2 minutes is an issue of concern. And I was thinking that it's diverging from poster presentation where you have really no fence out of your context of communication. So how do we marry our research in terms of affecting policy, where you have to do oral communication, and vis-a-vis poster presentation? Thank you.
Okay, now I left something out of the last answer, which you reminded me of. So if I leave something out of my answer to you, please put up your hand and yell it out to me again. The predatory conferences and predatory journals are a major problem because, as you see, they're very savvy in trying to convince you that they're real. The sorts of things that I had up there about checking with the organisation that's supposed to be hosting this, that you would normally expect to host this, making sure that things look the way they should. So, for example, one of the things that's very odd about the fake conference is that you could submit your abstracts and 3 months later the conference was on. A major international conference will normally need you to have things in, 6 to 9 months in advance, because it's going to go out to multiple reviewers and then it's going to come back to the committee and then it's going to have a whole lot of judgments. So the things that I know, things that have come in my inbox in the last week since I did this, was something that was all in capital letters from someone I'd never heard of. Someone who said, we don't bother with a website, just send us your paper via email and it will go out to reviewers. Things that are just a bit odd for a major international conference. And I know that it's really difficult because when you're at the beginning of your career, you don't know what's odd. So if you have a supervisor who you can pass this along with, a senior scholar who you can get to be more confident that the conference that you're going for is a conference that will really help your career and not be something that you'll be embarrassed to write on your curriculum, on your CV, because it will show that you were defrauded. So there are a couple of things that I mentioned up there. Make sure that the dates are right. Make sure that the parent URL is the right one. Make sure that the conference name is exactly to the letter right. Make sure that it's the organisations that are supposed to be sponsoring and partnering with them are the ones that should be there and that you can find it on their website. Okay. The predatory conferences are a major problem, as Tony said, even for people who are very senior. The second thing you asked me about about was theoretical papers. Many conferences have a stream for theoretical papers, and they're absolutely encouraged. Many theoretical papers have actually got a major theoretical component, but they're testing something empirically as well. You know, so think about whether it's a solely text-based proposition or not. The new and emerging areas is always an issue. So, for example, 20 years ago, you would not find sessions that would explicitly mention the use of social media by young people, cyberbullying by young people. You know, 50 years ago, we didn't have things where there were streams for people who are orphans by HIV. Now you'll find that. Find the place that's the closest to it in terms of the review panel. Identify that. Usually they ask you, what do you think is the most suitable review panels? And then try to link it with their agenda. So if it's normally about peer social relations and you've got cyberbullying, say something that says, Facebook and other social media are now one of the main communications in peer relation, forms of communication in peer relations. Link it explicitly to their agenda. So they don't go, oh, this one doesn't belong with us. See whether or not you can make head or tail of it. See whether or not you think it's yours. So try to link it in with whatever the review panel is that you've identified as the review panel that you're going, that you're nominating as the most relevant one. Yeah? But you will always, if you're at the cutting edge, it'll always be a little bit tricky to fit it into the traditional review panel titles. But we want that. We want the new. So we did predatory, we did new, we did, was there another? There's something else, I think. Oh, yes. Sometimes you do well-conducted research. So I had a student. We had done several studies of refugee young people and discovered high levels of depression. And she wanted to do a study that identified the factors, the most important factors, discriminating those young people who developed clinical levels of depression and those that didn't. She went out, she just did a great study of 120 young people newly arrived in Australia, resettled refugees, and found that not a single one of them met the criteria for depression. She can't answer her question. Yeah? What she can do is say, well, I can't use that data set to answer my original question. What interesting question could I use this data set to answer? Yeah? But if she put forward my aim is to work out the factors that distinguish the kids who develop clinical depression from those who doesn't, and then goes and says, I didn't find any kids, the reviewers are going to go, why are you telling us this? You can't address the aim. The aim is very significant. You know, it's got high level of interest. But since you can't address it, what do you want us to do with this? Why should people come? Because the people who are organising the conferences have got a problem. They're competing with predatory journals and a whole lot of others, real conferences, for you to apply to them and to come to theirs. If people turn up at their conference and there's a whole lot of papers displayed or posters displayed that are irrelevant or of no interest, are they going to spend the $500 coming back there next time? No, they're going to go somewhere else. They cannot afford to take posters or paper submissions that are not going to be of interest to the kinds of people they think they normally attract to the conference. Yeah?
Thank you so much, Prof. Julie. We are growing every year. And the last time when you spoke with us about the predatory conference, That was a homework for me, and I like to share with other scholars my findings. I went on Google and then I searched for conferences, and then particularly with interest conference which are having travel grants. And then I came across one conference. It was the third call for that conference. It's still in its early stages, and it looks like it was just so promising. And then I went and looked at participants to look for a common name, and then I picked up one name, only one name, Professor Sylvia Kohler. And then I was like, hey, now I don't know what to do. Everything looks like so fine. And I wanted actually to contact Professor Sylvia. I couldn't get her details, but I went on Facebook. I know she's on Facebook, and lucky enough, she posted the call on her wall. I tried to share it with some of the scholars. Some they did receive it, but they said the due date was so near. And then we applied, those who applied, and we received funding. We were not even so sure. I was in that plane. I was even not sure whether I would be back in South Africa. And when I arrived at the conference, I arrived as early as I was the earliest because I couldn't sleep. And then I met Comfort. Comfort made it. Yes. Comfort from Cameroon, and Given Habunda from Zambia. And then we were the three happy, only Africans. So the conference is there. We can share it. The next call is in 2021. It's going to Belgium. It's the ICPS. The mother body is APS. Association for Psychological Science. That's the mother body. And the conference is the International Convention of Psychological Science. So maybe if you can look at it for those who didn't have an alternative conference. Thank you.
Yes, you can be too tough too. So there was once a real conference where I was an invited speaker in China, and I nearly didn't go because I just was going to throw it into my spam box. It turned out to be a real one.
Thank you, Professor Julie. I like the image you use of the meal, the noodles, the chicken, and the vegetables. And what happens when you have written an abstract on the chicken, an abstract on the vegetables, and an abstract on the noodles, and they have all gotten accepted, but you don't get a travel grant? Do you give up and look for another research project, or is that the end of the road with ISSBD conference? How many times do you continue to apply?
Okay, so this is the very difficult thing of you can have a conference paper submission that you think is directly on target, which you believe is well researched and which you believe is well expressed, and it can still get knocked back. And it becomes very frustrating after you've done that one or two times. What everyone needs to understand is that we used to have an international philanthropic organisation that used to give us money for the travel grants, and they have withdrawn. So ISSBD needs to pay for every travel grant out of the amount of money that Westerners pay for membership, because the cost that folks in Africa pay, the $5 does not even cover the journals. So we are in a situation where there'll be many good papers, many good scholars we will not be able to support. We are one of the only organisations that gives some support, but it's going to be very competitive to get one of the travel grants. And for those people who don't get a travel grant, I would say you will be in the majority of people, and what we need to do is to try to find other venues and other ways in which you can present your work to people who would be interested. And one of the possibilities is to do more things that are at the regional level, more African, more Asian, more South American ventures, where the travel costs are smaller, the amount of sponsorship would need to be smaller, and so on. But ISSBD is facing some real challenges, and there's going to be real limits to what we're able to do.
Thank you, Prof. Julie. I want to find out from you whether the keywords are also included in the abstract word count.
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Julie. My question is related to the significance of an abstract, and maybe one study may have maybe significant at the local context, but maybe its importance internationally and in other parts of the world may not be that much significant or relevant because of it might have been studied very well and the like, but locally, maybe let's say in Ethiopia or in some other African countries, it might have not been studied or never studied for that matter. So maybe how the goodness of it between the significance in the local context and international context could be balanced.
I think that there's fantastic research that is powerful at a local level, that can change the lives of people, but it's locally relevant, not relevant for folks at the higher level. But many things have got a theoretical framework, and the theoretical framework is the one thing you don't get rid of when you're cutting everything out. Because if it's something that speaks to attachment theory, if it's something that speaks to Bronfenbrenner's framework, if it's something that speaks, and it's been tested in a new and unique context, that's usually really, really interesting to people, even if they're from Japan or Berlin or Iceland. Yeah? So if you can keep a strong theoretical framework around your research, then even if the results are very local and you're doing it with children affected by HIV, and that's not something that is a highly relevant thing in Japan, the fact that this theory which they're interested in is you've got data which speaks to that theory, it may not test the theory, but speaks to that theory in a new context, makes it interesting to people, beyond the specific details of the findings that you have for your location. Does that make sense? Okay, I think Dr. Jabangaway is getting anxious about the passage of time.
Maybe we would have one left.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a quick recommendation regarding the issue of predatory journals and conferences. For emerging scholars, it's really an issue. So what I would recommend is they should make consultations with other institutions, like departments within their institutions. For instance, the libraries, they offer support regarding that. Before you submit your very good paper to a journal, it's important that you consult your librarians to say, hey, there's this journal where I want to publish my paper. Could you please check if it's a legitimate journal before you put up your paper? Thank you.
It's a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Another round of applause for Julie. Thank you so much, Julie, for this wonderful and informative session. And I was just showing Pamela one WhatsApp message that I've kept at bay for 2 months. And even up to yesterday, I received another WhatsApp message to say, hey, we're still waiting for your paper. And these people started engaging me in October last year. And they are predatory, so I just kept quiet. Was the event, so my phone number is on my account on the UZ website. So thank you once more, colleagues. We are running slightly late. Can I possibly request that we have our tea and Titi? Where is Titi? Sure, Titi. For those who would like to engage with Titi from VSO, she's here. She also has, some pamphlets, publications on a number of issues. There's also male involvement, peer-to-peer interventions that she has to distribute. Thank you. Then, if you check your emails for one, there is for the link with this presentation. Check also. There's also a Kobo a link for the Kobo. This one for the networking. It's also there. Please check and confirm. If you didn't get that, please let us know, so that we just do it right on time. Thank you.
Who is in charge of the emails? Because they are sending emails to a different person, so I need to correct my email.
Oh yeah, like the latest, I asked our digital native. Because I was informed that I'm a digital immigrant yesterday. Thank you.